We talk about retirement like it's a finish line. You work hard, you save, you hit a certain age, and then you're meant to stop. But for a lot of people, retirement doesn't feel like freedom. It feels uncertain, sometimes even a bit unsettling. Well, today we're talking about retirement as a transition and not a switch, and why money, health, identity, and purpose are far more connected than we realise. I'm Mark Leishman, and I'm joined by Hannah McQueen, founder of Brightly, and someone who's spent years helping New Zealanders plan for retirement, and more recently, seeing what happens when people reach it without a plan. Well, Hannah, your background in retirement has always been financial, helping people out, seeing if they can actually afford to retire. But since Brightly's come along, it's sort of changed. You've noticed there's something bigger happening out there?
Yeah, in my past life, I was trying to determine for my clients, or how much are they going to need for retirement, because it's different for different people or different lifestyles. Then to work out, or based on what they need, what are they likely to have from what they're doing at the moment, and is there a gap? And usually there would be a gap. What are we going to do about it to close it? And what we acknowledged, but didn't always name, is that there are things that happen in retirement that it's hard to prepare for financially, but you need to have a buffer for them. Or you've got these financial milestones that will come along in retirement. The most common one is downsizing your home or reducing your income, downsizing your home. Things can go wrong as well, and sometimes the cost of care, getting access to care or paying for you and your partner's care, is one of those big unknowns when you're doing a retirement plan. And so I'll try and build that out. And I could never put my finger on exactly how much you need for care, because it depends on the type of care you need, and there's so many variables. My job was just to make sure that there was enough so that if care was needed, you were going to be okay. And so I was coming at it from a financial perspective. Over at Brightly, my new era, I'm looking at how to navigate those headwinds proactively, how to reduce the probability of needing some of those costs that many families can't comfortably afford, even on a good day. And that's what Brightly does. It's about proactive and preventative care, so you don't have the big cost at the end.
I mean, health is vitally important, but the finances as well are probably equally important in a sense, because they do create a huge amount of stress if things aren't going well. So what did you actually see that was playing out in people's lives?
Well, back to my last era, we definitely understand that money causes stress, or a lack of plan can cause stress and anxiety. It can put pressure on relationships. It can put pressure on sleep. It's linked to your well-being, kind of your sense of feeling in control. So that was sort of what I was carrying into things with Brightly. What became clearer, and I actually was able to get some clinical evidence on it, see it firsthand, is that it shows up differently as you get older. So anxiety is prevalent, but it becomes more prevalent. So if you're worried about your money before retirement, you were definitely worried about money in retirement. It impacts your sleep. From a health perspective, as you get older, your tolerance to absorb those things reduces. So it can start to permeate into other domains of health, and that can impact your balance. It can impact your brain health. It can impact your cardio health. Like it suddenly, you can see how it leads all the way through. And for many people, it starts the anxiety. They possibly wouldn't even pinpoint it as anxiety. It's this feeling of you wake up in the middle of the night and you don't know if you should be spending money or not. You just don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And in retirement, it's weird because you've had this shift towards, instead of growing money for the future, you've arrived at that future and you're having to eat into that base. That feels very uncomfortable. That is, for some people, the equivalent of self-harming, right? From a financial perspective, you're eroding your base. You're kicking against the pricks. We haven't been trained to do that. So then what happens is that you've got your retirement savings. Unless you have a plan, one of two things happen. You either just don't spend. You're too nervous to spend. It feels reckless. You're scared. Or you do spend, but you feel guilty straight away because you're like, you're kind of taking the preventative or the apologetic route, but you're not feeling good.
So you kind of don't enjoy it when you do spend.
It. And this is your era to enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's something that we have tried to confront head on with Brightly, with an acknowledgement that of the role that the finances play in this.
I mean, it's psychologically, when you're facing retirement, it's very tricky because when you're earning, you always think, well, okay, things are tight at the moment, but I'll just keep working away and it'll come right. But of course, once you retire, the options are much more limited as to what you can actually do if you are facing the money draining away.
Yeah, and before retirement, you have a few options. You can earn more.
Mm-hmm.
You
work harder, of course.
Work harder. Work for longer.
Mm-hmm.
Spend less. Get your money working harder. Right? Those are all things that you could do. As you get older, your tolerance for some of those things reduces, or it just doesn't exist. Some people don't have the energy to work, or they don't want to.
And you have the system against you too. I mean, you hear stories now of people above 50, struggling to find jobs because they're considered, too old. I mean, for goodness sake.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everything's stacked against you. But that just means we've got to take ownership of it, and we can't drift towards retirement. We've got to be more deliberate, and the transition from work through retirement becomes a lot more significant than what we've been taught.
How much do people need when they retire?
I've been asked that question so many times, and I'm not going to give a pithy answer, but there is a bit to the answer. What you need, the assumption most people have for retirement, a good retirement, or have to be financially successful, is that you can live the lifestyle that you were used to when you stop working. And so we need to know, well, what does that lifestyle cost? And my lifestyle might cost more than someone else's, but we need to understand what that is. And not everyone could tell you, well, my life costs 80 grand a year. Without kind of going through things and itemizing it, you could work it in reverse pretty quickly. You could say, well, this is how much money I've received this year. How much money do I have left over at the end of the year? If the answer is zero, well, the amount that you're receiving is what your life costs. And of course, you could tighten it, but that's at the moment what you were used to. So you're accustomed to that. So we understand what that number is, and if you want to live that life for as long as possible, then the next thing you say, well, how long are you going to live for? And no one knows how long they're going to live for, but I use a placeholder of, well, let's assume you live to 90, right? So if you're 65, where most people retire, and I'm not suggesting you should, but if you're 65 to 90, that's 25 years that we need to be able to think about how are we going to supplement or how much money is needed to supplement the income you're going to get from the New Zealand pension to close the gap. And that's different for different people. But if we can start with some really broad assumptions like that, then you say, okay, well, this is how much my life is costing. This is what I'm getting from the super. So the difference is the shortfall. And you've got 25 years of that shortfall. So you just multiply that by 25 and that's your number. Yeah, so let's say you had a shortfall of 20,000 each, so 40,000 a family a year. Well, if you multiply that for 25 years, we've got $1 million that we need to come up with. Now, a lot of people will have KiwiSaver, so they would deduct that from the $1 million. Normally, about 60% of your retirement number can come from KiwiSaver if you've started at the right time. Not everyone has KiwiSaver, but that's the gap. So then the difference has to come from somewhere. Where is it going to come from? Well, for a lot of people, that's downsizing their home, if they have a home, or it was extra saving they needed to have made, but never did. And that's the gap that you're trying to close out. Right. And so for a lot of the people that I was working with, their kind of estimated living costs were 80 to 120 grand. This is after they're mortgage free at this point. So let's just say 100 grand a year, well, you're going to get 100 grand a year, if we say for 25 years, so that's $2.5 million is what you need to spend for that lifestyle. The pension is going to give you $500,000 each, like kind of 25 grand a year for that time. So then you're down to, what are we down at 1.5, and then your KiwiSaver might close out another gap. Maybe that reduces it by another million, at $500,000 each for you and your partner, perhaps. And then the difference is
what's remaining.
What's remaining. And that's not necessarily the end of the world. There are ways that we can close that, but the most common way to close that is, well, I'll just sell my house. That will be how I bridge that. And that is certainly a trump card to play. Most people play it at the wrong time, or they don't understand what they needed specifically from that transaction to try and reverse engineer it. So again, you tend to drift towards what is one of the most significant financial decisions you will make in the last 25 years of your life.
When you say most people make the wrong choice or do it too soon, or what do you mean by that?
No, I think they downsize too late.
Too late.
And they're not clear on what they needed to get from the transaction. Right. So they're grateful for any money because that will just kind of replenish the coffers
for now.
And you just take whatever you can get, especially if you've been stressed. But there was an opportunity to be really thoughtful about that, and that's missed for a lot of people. And if you have a lot of money, it doesn't really matter. You've got the buffers. Who cares if you're inefficient with your financial choices? But for many of us, we can't afford to be inefficient with those choices. And what we don't appreciate is, as you get older, it actually gets harder to be more financially deliberate or strategic in those moments, because it gets hard.
Is there a part of retirement that is the most expensive? Okay.
Yeah, so there's two, I guess there's the planned part and the unplanned part. So normally my experience was for the first 5 years of retirement, no matter when you retired, that your first 5 years, that's when you want to live a good life, right? Like you've earned it.
And you're generally fit.
You're
fitter,
fit.
yeah.
You're going to be the youngest in your retirement era.
Yeah.
And you want to pat yourself on the back on some of those things. I mean, it is a milestone to get to that. But that translates to cost, right? So that's more travel. It's possibly wanting to see family members that you might not have seen as regularly, that now you've got the time to do it. Or it could be just going on overseas trip with your spouse or your friends. That costs money. Often during that time, people are wanting to upgrade their car. It might be their last upgrade, but that's another outlay. And they're starting to think about, okay, what's the plan for the house? Not necessarily that they're prepared to downsize. I don't think they've put that much money in, but this is often the time they've got the space to think about the renovation they never did, or the maintenance they never got round to. Now, all these things just cost money. They are deserved, possibly even justified, but they cost money. And so for your first 5 years, even if you are living a life to which you are accustomed, so your day-to-day living hasn't really spread, it's those one-off costs that cost a lot more than what people realise. So that's the first part. And then the second part is more the unplanned, things you don't want. If you or your partner need to go into care, that is a financial cluster. And that's the bit around the downsizing that is a problem, because most people delay the downsizing.
Until they really need it.
Yeah, and then it is emotional, you are in crisis, and it is horrific.
And pressure to sell.
Yep, and you don't get the premiums that you needed, that you probably deserved, because this is happening a whole lot faster than you should, and you're worried about so many other things than maximising that transaction. And that it just means that, what comes is harder than what it needed to be.
So really it's that first 5 years after retirement that are the kind of crucial time in a way, because does after that, do things tend to settle down, or...?
Yeah, well, you definitely start to spend a little bit less. A lot of people think I'm going to spend a whole lot less in retirement. Like it's certainly people who have never stuck to a budget. They'll be like, oh, I'll just kind of cut my cloth to suit what I need. That is hard to do. that is hard to do if you're not used to it.
And the other thing, I suppose, is, you've been spending years getting people into a good position to face their retirement. But you mentioned earlier in our wee piece the shift from saving to spending, when you know that it's not a bottomless pit anymore. Is that's it makes people really uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, it's a shift from accumulating wealth or building your wealth to depleting your wealth. Most people don't know how to do that. It is tricky to navigate. It feels uncomfortable and you've never been trained for it. And the worst thing is that it often means you don't feel comfortable enjoying precisely what you've saved for, so you can enjoy it.
Yeah.
There are different ways to combat that. And I think that one of the challenges, I think, for a lot of people is they want to hit 65, maybe 66, and in their mind there's sort of a cutoff to, okay, I'm now going to be retired, which usually means no longer receiving paid income. That's quite a dangerous way to look at it. And when I was coaching my clients back in the day, it was, okay, well, can we transition you through to just reducing your income and you celebrating that you're in the next era? And so that might mean that you are working a little bit less or you're traveling a little bit more, but you're trying to bring forward some of those perks of retirement into what you're experiencing, but you've got the income still coming in. And that seems to be quite a nice a step before the income stops, because it's a lot easier to stick to a budget when you know to not feel guilty if you're only covering the bare necessities. It's when you introduce those discretionary spending that it does feel reckless. And sometimes it is reckless. But if we can go through this transition where you have that arc of 5 years where you are enjoying those things, and it's built into a plan. You're not just kind of say la vie, let's just go for it for 5 years. You're trying to navigate and influence that so you end up where you need to end up. But instead of a hard cut-off with income, I would keep that going. Increase your discretionary spending during that time, because that's what you're working for to enjoy.
Yep.
And then when we do start to reduce your income, let it be to only cover your basics, which is a whole lot easier to accept, even if you are depleting your wealth base in doing so.
And I suppose there's a period when, if you've been retired for a few years, where you sort of don't want to travel much anymore. You don't need a new car because the one you bought 5 years ago is still fine. Do you find that, and so people do tend to spend less money when they're a bit older?
Well, the first 5 to 10 years,
assuming their health's all right, of course.
Yeah, first 5 years of my experience is you spend more. The next 5 years, it's starting to be contained, and then you're 75 to 80, it is starting to come down, and your ability to travel which is the biggest cost, the biggest kind of drain on retirement for a lot of people. You don't really have the appetite to go as far kind of as you approach your 80s.
And there's also the things like travel insurance suddenly gets very expensive if you're over a certain age, doesn't it?
Well, that's
like health insurance does too.
Well, health insurance is a killer. And when you go into retirement, people are like, oh, my costs are going to cut right back. And it's like, maybe your discretionary costs will cut back because you can choose to not do all those things. Yes. But your fixed costs tend to increase because things like healthcare, as an example, your insurances tend to increase. So all of those things, it's not what people think when they retire. They think that it's a whole lot cheaper. And if we think of the superannuation as an example, which is what Kiwis get paid, it's about $500 a week. So think of $500. Well, what would that cover? And I'm not suggesting that the taxpayer pays more because we actually can't afford it. But if we say, well, if you had $500, let's assume you've got to pay for your water, your rates, your phone. Maybe that's combined $100 a week. Maybe $150 for food. And yet, I mean, I spend a whole lot more than that, but let's just say that. Maybe $100 for petrol.
You've got family. If it's just two people.
Yeah, well, they would even just on me, I'd be stressed. Yeah, but it's come to that, and then you put insurance in on top of that. That's $500. That doesn't include eating out or hobbies or anything. It doesn't include the rates on your home, the maintenance on your home. Like there's a gap. And
those uncertain ones, like the car breaks down, or you know.
And at the moment, we haven't even clothed you with that money, so you're walking around naked. So like it is, it's confronting, and it is possible to do. It is absolutely. I've seen it, but you need to be prepared for it. Your spending needs to be so contained. You probably need a vegetable garden legitimately, and you absolutely have to own your home mortgage-free, absolutely, by the time you get to that point, or you need to be living somewhere where you're not having to pay for your accommodation, which is either with family, but it's usually just easier to own your home.
Is there a time when people should start thinking about this? Presumably people watching this and listening to the podcast are probably of an age who are obviously really interested in it, but is there a sort of like, is it 40 or 20? When should you start on this?
Well, they say, when do you plant a tree? Yesterday. The other best time is today. Yeah. I think it's never too late to start. I've worked with...
never too late?
No. Well, it's never too late to improve an outcome.
Yeah.
It might not have got you what you desired, but when push comes to shove, people are prepared to compromise on what they desire.
Yes.
And people are prepared to delay and reorder things or reprioritise things, but they need to know what the trade-offs are. And at the moment, it's very hard for people to get line of sight on what the trade-offs are. So you're kind of in the absence of that, well, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And that is dangerous. But with Brightly, I remember in one of our first cohorts that we were testing the concept, and we had our clinical team, and they were looking at all the health domains, like the biological and the social and the psycho components of that. And I was looking at it from a financial perspective, and I was talking to some of these patients, and I said, like, are you worried about your money? Like, how does the retirement feel? And a lot of these, I think the age of that cohort was maybe 75 to 80. So it's certainly at a higher end. And more than 50% of them said that they were financially stressed. And I'm like, okay, well, help me understand your situation. And this was the thing that surprised me. They had more than most. It wasn't that they couldn't afford to put the lights on. And some people do have that problem, right? Like it literally is, can't afford to put the heater on, put another thermal on. These people had enough, but they had questions, or they were uncertain around, there was uncertainty around certain things. And in the absence of that, it kind of just churned in their head all the time. And they just needed to talk to someone and be directed to identify the right problem to then be connected to the right person. So I'll give you an example. If you think about the retirement issues, it could be that you genuinely don't have enough money. Well, to be honest, there are so many things that you can access to support that you can support for
be supported for,
that you can be supported for. There's different benefits you can get to support health costs. You're getting the New Zealand super. There should be ways that you can navigate that. But if you're not used to sticking to a budget, you're going to need some coaching and support. I guess that's one component. Most of the people that I was working with here, they own their own home. So you could say that, well, you're wealthy if you can own your own home, but they had liquidity problems, so they didn't have the cash. They weren't surviving on the $500 a week. They were wanting to spend $1,000 a week, as an example, which is still only, $50,000 a year, which is nothing. So they had depleted their savings, and then they're like, I don't know what I need to do. And for them, we needed to talk about, okay, well, is this the time that we need to be thinking about downsizing, or do we get a reverse mortgage to tie you over for a little bit? There's a whole lot of risk with all of those things, but I think the point there is that there are options, and they needed to be quantified to determine, well, is that something that I should consider? And often my observation with financial stress, it's usually comes because you can't see a way out. You can't see a way through. And when someone can present what options are there, even if some of the options require sacrifice or a reprioritization of a goal, there is a willingness to do it if it's going to get them to where they need to go, right? And so that was interesting. So when I look at the retirement conundrums, often people don't know when they should downsize, usually downsizing too late. They might have equity in their home. They don't know how to access it. And bearing in mind that your family usually have an opinion at this point, which at least 50% of the time is entirely unhelpful as a general rule. You know, like they...
Kind of self-serving.
It's self-serving, yeah, like they want their inheritance. It's like, back off, Bob. Like, we're trying to make sure mum's okay. And so that was always interesting to navigate. But, I mean, Bob wouldn't have the guts to say it to me, but they would be putting pressure on their parent who is losing agency and is starting to feel guilty about just trying to...
Living.
Yeah, I'm just like, this isn't appropriate. Yeah. Do better, Bob. Yeah. That's kind of what I want to say to Bob.
Bob?
Yeah, exactly. So then you go, okay, well, let's rewind this back. So I would present the options, and if Bob was a pain, I would say, why don't you get Bob in and I'll talk to Bob as well? Because they feel... I hate it when older people feel guilty about spending their own money or about living. Like, there is something just so wrong with that. And sometimes Bob isn't actually selfish. Bob just is stressed by the situation and he doesn't know what to do. So you could be gracious towards Bob, or sometimes Bob is the problem. So there's just a whole lot of unknowns, and most people haven't experienced that. And when they understand what the options are, that they're not, that there's costs and benefits with each option, that there is risks that you can contain, and there are opportunities, and that's an objective conversation. It's a qualified conversation. It's a grown-up conversation, but you're getting access to the facts. And so sometimes Bob is a bloody conspiracy theorist at the same time. So he has a view on some financial options that actually is factually incorrect, and you need to just kind of lay things out. But Mum's got no clue on how to keep Bob in his place. So there's just dynamics, right? And navigating that's really interesting. And for older people, we've got to make it that they can access their wealth more easily than what the system permits them to. And that takes some care to do that.
I mean, do a lot of people that you've spoken to in that particularly that cohort fear that they're going to run out of money? And what happens if they do run out of money?
Yeah, they do think that they will run out of money. I think my other observation in that cohort is they think they might run out of money, or that they will be taken advantage of by the system. And that, because when you come back to those big milestones around, well, when you downsize, it's about doing it at the right time, but it is also about maximising the value of your property to do that. And you're going to need to bring in specialists to help you do it. Not everyone does that well, and so then they don't get the premium that they should have. Or they have found their next property, but they haven't sold their home. And for some people, there isn't going to be a backup plan, and so you've got to be able to navigate that. Well, that's bridging finance. That's pretty gutsy stuff. And then you've got the idea of a reverse mortgage that could be available to you, but that's got some risks attached to it as well. Good. And then you could be asking your kids for something. It's just weird, right? Like, it's layered and it's hard. A lot of people do worry that they're not going to have enough, and the impact when you don't have enough is, well, it can be jarring, but in theory, no one dies from it. The impact is you will have to downsize your home, and you might have to get a much smaller property than what you wanted to get, or you might need to move further away than what you wanted to. Those are the practical impacts. No one's died from it, but that can be uncomfortable. And for some people, they can remold their life to kind of make up the gaps that presents, like being further away from family or friends. But it does take some thoughtfulness to do that. But the other bit that's weird is, so you've been forced to downsize or sell the home altogether. And you might, there's a point where I was doing a modelling for one client where they couldn't buy the property that they wanted, but they could afford to pay rent on a property for another 15 years from the proceeds they got from their home. And so for them, that actually made sense. But that's pretty confronting and hard to do, because we're always told, like, never sell your home. And you're like, actually, you have to, if you're wanting a particular quality of life, the way that we facilitate that is through you renting. That's weird. That sort of goes against all financial logic. But that's what happens in retirement. It comes down to the liquidity, not just what you own, but what's your access to the cash. Because a lot of people own a lot, and they actually budget quite well, but it's the liquidity events that really upset things. Like if the car blows up when it wasn't supposed to, because it always happens when it wasn't supposed to. Or if your kids, who are supposed to be independent at this point, if they've got a problem, like you're going to help them, right? But no one's not going to help. And it's, I think, navigating that. But the impact of all of it is your life gets very, very small. It's workable, but it's very, very small and probably uncomfortable.
And is that a time to look at the retirement villages?
Well, probably not. You probably can't afford the retirement village if it's tight. The time to look at the retirement village is, well, I think the average age that people are going into them is about kind of your mid-70s to 80s. It serves a particular type of the market. Some people I know have an allergic reaction to going into a retirement village. And a retirement village, just to be clear, that's independent living.
Yes.
I think I would love it, to be honest. But
some people who might be living on their own and they're still really fit go into a retirement village. It's a great way to meet people, socialise. There's lots of clubs, lots of sports to
there's great social connection. Yeah. It's safe. It's secure.
Yes.
The maintenance is low, all of those things. For other people, they feel like they're hemmed in.
Yeah.
I've read some studies that suggest ageing well is about integration in the community, not being ring-fenced off to other people of the same age, right? Like that can be a challenge or something you've got to be quite deliberate in if you're going to try and combat that. But it absolutely can serve some people. The problem with a retirement village entry is that it's often the same price as a home. So if we're trying to downsize, can't always downsize into a retirement village. That's not always available for some people.
Now, you've mentioned reverse mortgages. They're quite controversial, aren't they? What do you think of them? And what are the fish hooks, if you like? Well,
like anything, there's normally a pro and a con. And if I'm just looking at it analytically, it's a card you can play, that most people can play. It does get a bad rap, and I think largely that's misinformed. Most people have a reverse mortgage, certainly the people that I've worked with who have required one. It's for a period of time that they've had the reverse mortgage. It's not indefinite. And I think, in fact, the average length of a reverse mortgage is 7 years. So the essence of a reverse mortgage is you're using the equity in your home. So let's say your home, just for math, let's say it's worth $1 million. You might be able to access 20% of that equity, so $200,000. And you could draw that down. And as you get older, actually, you can access a little bit more. So you don't need to access the $200,000 straight away. Your shortfall might have been, I think we said if you're a couple, it might be $40,000 a year. Well, you might access a portion of that against your home. Or if it was $40,000, then you've got a few years before you're going to eat into that $200,000. Like, it's going to buy you 5 or 6 years. So that can be helpful for some people, especially if they're not ready to downsize, or where they actually need to end up is possibly 2 moves, mentally 2 moves, going from a large family home to a smaller to actually a contained unit. Not everyone can take the leap to the contained unit, right? And so in one go. So this could buy you the time so that you are 5 or 6 years older and you are ready to get to do kind of a smaller and only one downsize, because you should ideally only downsize once. And also during that time, your home might have gone up in value. So yes, you've got this mortgage on it. And with a reverse mortgage, it's that as you draw down, interest is getting charged and the interest gets added to the loan. So your loan balance, you might have drawn out $40,000 for the year, but you had to pay the interest on that, which you could choose to pay, but most people don't have that money. Let's say that was $10,000 for the year, so that gets added to the loan. So
suddenly it's 50.
It's 50. And that absolutely compounds. I'm not saying it doesn't compound. The trade-off is, but what does it give you? And is that extra cost worth whatever the benefit is. And that's to be decided on a case-by-case basis. If I think of some people who would use a reverse mortgage, like the interest rate might be 8, maybe 9%, that's a whole lot cheaper than using a credit card at 20%. And credit cards don't get any rep or bad rap, right? Like that, we have these beautiful, like, live the life you want with an Amex or something crazy advertisement, and the reverse mortgage is, doesn't get any credit. Yeah. But if you're only going to use it in a small amount, much better. Yeah. If you're going to put your holiday on your credit card, better you put it on the home than on a credit card usually. But what's our plan to make sure that debt just doesn't spiral? And I think that's the bit that we've got to make sure we've got the guardrails in. And some people do abuse that, right? They are a bit reckless with it. And that's where we've just got to have it all dialed back.
How does it work though? So you get your 200,000. You're paying interest on that, but you can't afford to pay that interest, so it just gets added to the bill, and that means that your descendants, or when you sell the home yourself, getting much less for it. Is that the danger being that if it goes on too long, then suddenly the whole lot might be gone?
Well, it's structured so that actually can't happen, because I think to start with you can only get 20% of the equity out, and then that only increases slightly each year. Well, it's a trade-off. So we'll kind of put the emotion of it to one side. If you might have a facility of 200,000, you've drawn down a bit, there's interest to pay on that bit. If you pay that interest, then it's just like a normal loan. It's the fact that you're choosing not to pay that interest that it can start to grow, and then you get the interest on the interest. A concept all banks are familiar with, because that's how a general mortgage works, right? Like, it's just sort of compounding that interest. So I think my clients have used it. We've used it for 1 to 2 years. It served a purpose. It was never long term. The house got sold. It just made a smoother transition to get there. If they didn't use that, reverse mortgage, then they would have had to sell their home much earlier. And in some instances, they couldn't have sold it as quickly as they needed to. So it was like, well, you don't actually have a choice. We're trying to smooth out a transition for you. Right. And yes, it might come at a cost, but the cost is cheaper than the implication of not doing it.
Getting back to transitions, do you think people should just stop working? I'm 65, that's it, I'm out the door. Or should you phase it or just,
I think one of the worst things you can do is stop working immediately. Like, financially, it's certainly a pickle when you do that. It's a pain to a retirement plan. But I think what people underestimate is the role of work in life. Like, your work provides structure, routine, identity, social connection, and purpose. And that is, all those components are so important if you are wanting to have a rich life. And so you need to have something else to fill that void with, because it creates a void, and most people aren't ready for that void. So back to the question, should you stop work? If you can afford to transition through to less hours or less stress over a couple of years, so you're working beyond what you thought, that is better. And then, like, design your life. I don't drift, but if you can find purpose in lots of activities and community work and volunteering, absolutely. And you can find identity with some of those things, and you can be deliberate with trying to catching up with friends and have that social connection. You absolutely can do that. But some of those things take time to establish. And if you go from one extreme to the another, that is emotionally quite jarring. You're like, where am I? You've lost your way a little bit. And I can tell you, it's flippin' annoying to your partner who's having to put up with you, try and navigate like a wet fish where you are. And it's like, we can be more thoughtful with this. And if we're not, well, the benefit is that it's good for you. It's good for the soul. It's good for your bank account. It's good for your relationship. It's good for your brain health. All of those things. But it's just the worst thing we can do, I think, is a hard cut off and not even sure what comes next.
It's understandable though, isn't it? When you've had a life, perhaps you've had a life in the same job, or a career where you've had lots of stress, and it's not unreasonable to think, I'm just tired, I'm sick of this, I don't want to do this anymore. So it's really a factor of, so what do I do? To keep involved. I want to quit this job because I'm done. And it's just a matter of foreseeing that and perhaps thinking, well, I could go and drive a school bus or whatever, that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you need to be thinking, well, what is my next bit going to look like? And that might be working part-time. It might be taking a few months off just to kind of give yourself a chance to reset. It could be moving sideways or even down in the organisation. It could be taking your craft, your skill, and maybe applying it more to a freelance role where you're contracting to someone. So if, say, you've worked in accounts, you might be an assistant accountant somewhere, or marketing, or whatever the case is. It could be, like you say, you go and work, you start driving. I had one client who really missed the social connection and of just meeting people, because that's the problem with if your connection only comes from a couple of friends, you can get sick of them pretty quickly. And so I remember that he went and became an Uber driver. It gave him a little bit of pocket money, but he just loved the meeting of the people, right? So I think it surprises people the function of work and what else it brings to the table, because normally all we see it for is the stress and the annoying person that we're working beside and the idiot boss we're reporting to. Like, I get that, but it brings so much richness to your life if we can kind of get beyond it. And so we just want those little jobs that you could be doing. It could be, one of my favourite jobs is the old guys who go and work in Bunnings.
Oh, yes.
I love them. They are amazing. Or Mitre 10. They know so much and they are just so useful. Yes. You have to remain useful. For your own sense of purpose, you have to.
It's a great, the people, and to go in there, because they're so keen to impart their knowledge, they're enthusiastic about their jobs, and I think they're probably grateful that they've got the job, for one thing, which is, when you get older, that's a real factor.
Oh, and your confidence starts to drop as well, doesn't it, right? Yeah, agreed. Yeah, well, Bunnings is perfect because, or Mitre 10 or whoever they are.
That sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember, I often go in there and there'll be a young person there who you'll avoid. Because you'll be like, they will know nothing about anything, certainly not about the pipe I need to buy or the picture hook I needed to get at one particular time. So you avoid the young ones and you just go and look for someone who looks like they've got big hands, and you're like, they are going to be the one who can.
Grey moustache.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. Well, I love that, right? Another one, a common transition for people is into real estate.
Yes, yeah. I'm intrigued about, you've been dealing with a lot of people who are into retirement, as you say, they're over the 70 mark. What do they tell you about what it is actually like to retire? The hard facts about giving up your work and that transition from going off to work every day to suddenly being at home every day, and how does your wife or your partner cope?
Trim and Betty. The observation is a loss of confidence, because I think that,
and relevance, I suppose.
And relevance, and that comes through, and so that's what we want to fight to retain that. And that's sad, because with that loss of confidence comes a loss of agency.
Yeah.
And then you've got bloody Bob again in the area, right? So it's it's a thing.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you could have retired after selling your business Enable Me, but you haven't. You've gone on to this. How do you look at retirement personally? I mean, you're of an age now where you can still do a lot. Probably you don't have to worry about retirement. But I mean, how do you face your own retirement?
I'm not sure I'll retire in the true sense of the word. Like, I don't like this work till 65 and then stop. I think while I still have something to give, I want to be able to give it. I do enjoy relaxing though. So I think it's still about getting that balance. I love to travel, but I love the good things in life, but I love them most. They are sweetest to me when I have earned them. And so I like it when you do kind of a hard week's work, whatever that is for people. And you have the cool drink at the end of the day. Like it's that
You've earned it.
You've earned it. And I think for anyone's life, like there will be seasons where you sort of, where you're harvesting or when you're planting. But I think you've got to keep those seasons going. It's just the planting might be of a seed that you're not used to, I guess.
Have you had any tips that you've discovered through your own parents, the way they've faced it?
Yeah. My mum was really interesting because she actually used to work with me, technically for me, although I wondered if I worked for her at Enable Me. When she sort of ran our practice, and she was amazing. And when she transitioned out of work, and it happened earlier than what she wanted to, that was hard for her. And she said it took her about a year and a half to get used to not waking up every day to go into work. Because you think of like those processes. She used to start her day going to the coffee shop first thing in the morning before work. You had all those silly little relationships which actually were connection. So that's gone because you're not going to work anymore. And then you're not seeing all those people. You're not achieving in a measurable way. It's not getting celebrated or recognised. Like all of those things make. And
you feel like you probably have nothing to talk about. Well, I'm just at home all day. So what am I going to talk about? Can't
exactly
add to a conversation.
Well, wasn't that the police's ad campaign, Better Work Stories or something like that? And you do. Your work gives you good stories. Like you've got to bring something to the table at night to talk about. There's some variety. And so she said it took her kind of 1 to 2 years to get into that rhythm without almost feeling lost. And the way she works part-time. She has the structure of that each day. She doesn't need to technically, like looking at her financial position, I'd say, well, you don't need to if you don't want to, but she does want to. And the money that she earns from that gives her permission to spend it.
Yes.
And she can be relaxed about that. Whereas she would be nervous. She would be white-knuckled if she was starting to eat into her savings when she doesn't need to.
Yeah. So people who are facing this, what should they do you think? Facing retirement and trying to make those decisions. When do I retire? And how do I maintain a reasonable standard of living?
Yeah, well, with our Brightly members, we spend a lot of time trying to coach them on some of these things because some of our members are 60 and some of them are 80, right? So it's vast. But those who probably have less health issues because you're younger, in theory, normally have more milestone issues to navigate. So we want to start that as early as possible. We want to understand from a financial perspective, well, what do you need for retirement? We want to be able to calculate that for you really quickly. What is your shortfall and what are our options to close it? There's always options. It could be working longer. It could be spending less. It could be downsizing earlier. It could be investing differently. It's about just moving the levers, but just understand what they are and let that inform you before you get to the next stage. Because the problem, I don't know if it's Kiwis generally, but we seem to be useless at planning. I don't know why. Is it
Look at our country's infrastructure.
I know. It is a thing.
Yeah.
I think
she'll be right, eh?
Yeah,
It'll come right.
People think that you plan, I guess, if you've got lots of money. But you should be planning when you don't. Because they think, well, what's the point? I can't do anything about it. It's like, but you can. You just don't know what your options are. So you've concluded something that is wrong. And options are freeing. So I would be saying start thinking about your milestones a whole lot earlier. Work longer. Transition for longer. No hard cut-offs. Be prepared to downsize earlier. Think about your investments. What do you have? Because once you downsize, there should, like, say, if you sold a property for $1 million and bought a property for $600,000, there should be $400,000. What are we going to do with that? That is the lifeline we have relied on. Your home has come through when it needed to. But what do we do with that? Well, that's the next kind of stuff up that people make. Well, let's just put it in the bank. I'm like, oh my gosh, but it's eroding at a rate faster than inflation. And so there's just bits that we have to navigate.
Well, that scenario, what should you do with that? You've got the 400,000, you're going to put it in the bank, and you say, no, don't do that. What would you do with it?
Yeah, so I would be, when I'm trying to, back in my last era,
Yes.
I would be looking at, okay, well, of that 400,000, how much am I going to need in the next 2 years? So if we went back to that example, you had a shortfall of $40,000 a year. So that meant for 2 years, I need $80,000 that I can access. Maybe put that in the bank. And maybe I'd put an emergency fund in the bank. But money I'm not needing for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, I've got an investment strategy for that. And I'm investing those buckets or those pockets differently because I'm going to need them at different times. And that's where your investment strategy becomes really important, because when you need money within a short period of time, whilst you might be able to stomach volatility, if you need that money, you can't afford for it to be having dropped in value.
Mm-hmm.
So the longer you invest for, like say if you were in the share market, the more risk you take, the more volatile the investment can be. So on a good day, it will be really good. And on a bad day, it will be horrifying, right? Like that's but it trends up. Now, the problem is when you need money soon, you can't afford for a bad day in that time. And so you're trying to reduce that volatility, and that means you've got a different investment setting for that chunk of money. So the money you need in the first 2 years, you don't want any risk. The money you need from 2 to 5 years, maybe you want a little bit of growth, certainly a bit more than inflation, but you're not wanting to dine out on it because you need that money when it comes time to it. And the most recent example was COVID, where I had a client who was looking to buy a house, and we went into COVID, and right at the start of COVID, KiwiSaver dropped. It came back. That's the story. It comes back. But retirement often is about, in a moment in time, are you liquid? This client had money, a deposit, let's say it was 50 grand, which was needed to complete the house price. The day the market dropped, the day before she drew it out, she was $10,000 short. Now, if she could have waited a year, she would have had $20,000 more than what she needed, right? That is important. And that's the bit that causes you stress. Like when the car blows up, where is that money coming from? Or when your partner does need to go into care, where is that coming from? It's the moment of time, the liquidity at that point is something that we have to protect. And I don't think people realize it until it's kind of confronting you in the face, but we can navigate that really nicely. And you can't, and remember, we're trying to prevent the decline that causes some of these things over it brightly, but it's just don't drift. Don't drift.
So brightly it's not just health and well-being, it's across the board, isn't it?
Yeah, we're looking at all the domains of health, and we think that your financial health and your legal preparedness impact your general wealth and should be considered. Now, we're not the financial advisors, but our team can identify, well, what is it the problem that you need to solve for your situation from a financial perspective or from a legal perspective, and then we'll connect you with the right specialists for that. Some people might need a reverse mortgage. Some people should stay away from that. Some people might need help maximising the value of their property before they downsize. Some people don't want to do that. They want to be able to stay in their property for longer, so we need to get it so that it can accommodate them ageing. All of those things require suppliers that needs to be facilitated. And the thing that's very important to me is that this audience, as you get older, all those things are quite fragmented, and you want to be able to trust who you're bringing into your life. So, yeah.
So finally, what is the best plan to prepare for a successful retirement, apart from start yesterday?
I think it's about knowing your numbers and knowing your risks. There's no wrong answer, but there is an impact to every answer. So know how much you're going to need for retirement, know when the money runs out, So you will have some money, normally your KiwiSaver, that will fund your first few years of retirement. Well, when does that money run out? You've got to know that. And then if you were to get from that point to 90, how much more do you need? Could downsizing your home achieve that or not? Do we need to downsize your home and accompany that cash with a really thoughtful investment strategy, perhaps? Or can you afford to just put it under the mattress? If you've got lots of money, you can afford to do stupid things. But not all of us do, right? So not all of us have a lot of money to waste. So we've got to be thoughtful, but just know your numbers, understand the risks, your health risks, mitigate those. I mean, the best thing you do is not require care. So that's what Brightly is here for, is to maintain your independence for as long as possible. But just be okay with those risks and then look to mitigate them. Like, that's just no emotion. Put Bob in his place, but let's start to navigate this safely.
Well, lovely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And good luck, Bob.
Bob. Sure.
You don't have to have all the answers, but you do need a plan. If you have a retirement question, we'd love to hear it. And we'll throw them at Hannah, rapid fire, in a follow-up episode. Email them through to us. The details are in our show notes.
Yes, please do. We would love to hear from you. We will see you next time.